Historical facts about the birth of Ukraine and its desire to be annexed by Russia. The war between Russia and Ukraine is still fierce. Even though it has reached its 6th month, fighting continues in eastern and southern Ukraine. This battle is in fact related to the history of relations between the two neighbors in Eastern Europe. Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union. The separation of the two countries occurred when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. At that time, the largest part of the Soviet Union became Russia and the rest became other countries. Examples are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Belarus. In the same year, Ukraine also decided to become its own country. This independence was obtained through a referendum, which also elected the Soviet-era leader of Ukraine, Leonid Kravchuk, as the country's first president. Kravchuk was replaced by Leonid Kuchma in 1994. This was when Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear arsenal, which at that time was the third largest in the world. This release itself was in return for security guarantees under the Budapest Memorandum, which was also signed by Russia, the United States, US, and Britain. In 2004, pro-Russia figure Viktor Yanukovych was elected president of the country. However, allegations of vote rigging sparked protests in what became known as the Orange Revolution and forced a re-election. In re-election, a former pro-Western Prime Minister, Viktor Yushchenko, was finally elected president. Yushchenko took power on a promise to lead Ukraine out of the Kremlin's orbit, toward NATO and the European Union, EU. In the 2010 election, Yanukovych defeated Tymoshenko in the presidential election. In this victory, Yanukovych struck a deal with Russia to extend the Moscow Navy's lease on Crimea's Black Sea port in exchange for a gas price deal. Entering 2013, Yanukovych suspended trade and association talks with the EU in November and opted to revive economic ties with Moscow. This also sparked large-scale mass demonstrations in Kyiv. Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the West of inciting and supporting the protests. In early 2014, the protests reached a climax. At that time, the protest, which was called the Maidan Revolution, turned violent. Dozens of protesters were killed. In February, the parliament voted to remove Yanukovych. As the demonstrations and his overthrow took place, Yanukovych fled. A few days later, a group of gunmen stormed the parliament in Crimea and raised the Russian flag. Moscow finally took control of the territory after the March 16 referendum, with Crimea's overwhelming support for joining Russia. Shortly after, in April 2014, pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region declared independence. Fighting broke out and continued sporadically into 2022. In June 2014, tycoon and politician Petro Poroshenko was sworn in as president of Ukraine. He won the general election with 54.7% of the vote. In July 2014, a Russian-made missile brought down Malaysia Airlines passenger plane MH17 over eastern Ukraine en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, killing all 298 people on board. Even so, Moscow has denied involvement in the downing of the passenger plane. Then, in 2017, the pro-Western Poroshenko secured an association agreement with the EU on free trade in goods and services. Ukrainians also get the right to visa-free travel to the EU. In April 2019, Poroshenko was defeated by Volodymyr Zelensky in the Ukrainian elections. Zelensky, who is a comedian, excelled on promises of tackling corruption and ending the war in East Ukraine. In 2021, Zelensky submitted an application for entry into NATO to US President Joe Biden. Russia responded strongly to this by deploying large numbers of troops near the sovereign territory of Kyiv. Russia itself finally submitted a request to NATO in December 2021. Moscow requested that NATO stop any military activity in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. In response, NATO reaffirmed its commitment to a policy of openness and offered discussion of security issues. In a televised address on February 21, 2022, Putin said that Ukraine is an integral part of Russian history and has never had a genuine statehood history. He considered this to result in the country finally having a puppet regime. Shortly thereafter, on the same day, Putin signed an agreement recognizing the breakaway region of eastern Ukraine as an independent territory and commanding Russian troops there. On February 24, 2022, Putin declared war in a pre-dawn televised speech, and Russia launched a three-pronged invasion, targeting Ukrainian troops and air bases with missiles and artillery and striking areas in cities. As tens of thousands of people fled their homes, Zelensky ordered a general mobilization. Thank you for watching. I hope this knowledge is useful.